So you might be looking at this title and you might be like, wait, this guy who literally would just clown the iPhone XR every single day, he called it whatever he called it, he's saying that this is the most important iPhone or the most important phone of 2018. And to that question, I would say, first of all, don't call me Shirley. Second of all, I do think the iPhone XR is the most important phone that was released in 2018. Now, with me saying that, I'm not saying it's the best phone ever, obviously, but I think the impact that this phone had specifically, not even for Apple, but just as the whole entire phone market in general, I think it's really opened up a lot of eyes for the phone market, you know? And I'm not even just saying for the iPhone just in general, I'm saying for every single phone that was released this year, the iPhone XR in one way or another affects that and is affected by that. Now, this is how I'll break it down for you, okay? When the iPhone XR was released, okay, it was not a bad phone at all. Even now, I'm still saying it's a pretty dope phone. I mean, there's really not too much it's lacking. I mean, obviously the screen isn't perfect. It's not the best looking screen by a long shot. You can still see a lot of pixels. The bezel, obviously there's a lot more bezel on this versus something like an iPhone XS or XS Max. And, you know, there's no Force Touch either, but, you know, who's counting? So besides those couple of things, I mean, there's really not too much to complain about. The battery life is awesome. It still has wireless charging. It still has a pretty decent build quality. Glass on the back, the A12 chip, 3 gigs of RAM. Like, it's a pretty powerful phone, I would say. But the biggest problem with the iPhone XR was never the performance or anything like that. Maybe Force Touch on the screen, maybe. The biggest problem with this, in my opinion, was the price. This phone was way too expensive for what it was, and that's no secret, okay? I've made like 50 videos talking about it. That's the number one complaint I had, was the price. This phone should have never been released for $749 for the 64 gig variant and $799 for the 128 gig variant. They should have at least priced it like $699, even though it's like only like a $40 difference, $50, whatever it is. That's not that much in the grand scheme of things for a company like Apple. You know, they could have sold way more devices if they just priced it lower and then made more people a little bit like, oh, it's $699, it's not $749, okay, I'll buy it. Now they're doing it, you know, now they're lowering the prices a little bit. I think $649 would have been the perfect sweet spot, but I mean, it is what it is, and eventually a lot of people didn't buy it. Now, the crazy thing is that before this phone was released, people were saying that they were going to sell like millions of units. They were going to sell a lot of these things. They probably sold a lot of these devices, I'm not going to lie, but people were telling me, and people were just saying on YouTube, they were like, this phone is going to sell the most out of any other iPhone, even the 6 and 6 Plus, which sold like millions and millions of units, tens of millions. People were saying that the iPhone XR was going to beat that record. And at that time, I mean, I didn't really know too much about it. I mean, we were kind of speculating the price anywhere from like 600-ish. Some people were even saying 550. I was like, if they sell it for 550, they're not going to have any problem selling these things. But eventually it came out, they priced it up for $749, stupidest thing ever. And another thing they did stupid was they ended up releasing it like 2 months after or just 1 month after the XS and XS Max release, which was dumb. Why did they even do that in the first place? Whatever, okay? People were saying it was going to sell a lot of units of those, and I kind of was in the middle of that too. I was like, you know, if they price it right, they could probably sell a lot of them. What ended up happening now is that not only did they not sell a lot of them, they ended up doing a bunch of these shady little promo things like they did the other day on their homepage of like, oh, it's $449 now with the trade-in value. So if you guys aren't familiar, they recently just, I guess they're not selling a lot of these things, which is expected because there's $449 who's going to pay for that. Well, obviously I paid for it because I still have mine and it's already outside of the return policy, but it's kind of crazy too because Apple just hit their $1 trillion valuation, and ever since then they've just been losing tons of money, and they were the most valuable company. Now they're the third most, and you know, maybe in the future they'll go even lower, maybe they'll go higher, who knows. They're still going to recover, no doubt, but the fact that they lost so much money just in this one quarter is crazy. It's insane. And you know, I'm not going to say it's 100% due to the iPhone XR or XS or XS Max, but I think a lot of it has to do with iPhone sales in general. Not just the XS and XS Max, the newest ones, I'm talking about the older iPhones too. I just don't think a lot of people are upgrading their phones. So as we know, some of the production for the iPhone XR stopped recently, so they're not really making as many iPhone XRs either because they're selling less iPhone XRs than they thought, so that kind of makes sense. Now, shortly after this, okay, after everything started going on, Apple started freaking out, and you know, they started doing a lot of these random sales, and they started doing these trade-in values like I said earlier, and you know, this ultimately kind of showcased this strange thing they were doing. They never really focused and pushed this kind of narrative on a phone before, you know, they never, I mean, they did before, but they never really, like, in the last while, they haven't, like, increased the trade-in values and do tons and tons of marketing for these iPhones. You know, they've done marketing before, I'm not saying they haven't, but it's crazy to see what they're doing right now. Now, in some countries, like I said before, the price actually went down. I think Japan it went down about $100 so whatever that transfer rate is to Japan, that's how much it went down there. Now, the reason I say all that, the reason I spent probably like 5 or 6 minutes talking about all that stuff is because the market eventually dictated that this phone was not worth it for that price, okay? Maybe because it was too much money, maybe because it was a downgrade, maybe it wasn't because it just doesn't feel too good, or whatever the case is. The market dictated what this phone was supposed to be priced at, and because of that, people didn't upgrade. People were like, it's not worth it. It's not worth the $749. It's not worth whatever. And this phone, out of all the phones, this phone was blasted out to be the phone that was kind of a ripoff. The iPhone XS and XS Max, I'll be honest, I think that's more of a ripoff than the iPhone XR, but because the iPhone XR, it was never called the budget iPhone or anything like that, but that's kind of what you get in your head when you see a phone that has a cheaper screen. It doesn't necessarily feel as premium, I would say. The chassis of the phone is definitely something of like an iPhone 6s Plus or something like that. So people saw that and they were like, there's really no point in upgrading because it's just kind of like, it's not really worth it. I mean, $749. When I paid for mine, I paid $800 for this thing. So $800 you're paying for a phone out of the store, including tax. And it's like, it's not really worth it. And I definitely know before people have said that stuff and they actually like believed in it. But this release has been completely different, especially for this year. We have so many great phones for less than $750. We have the OnePlus 6T. We have all these other phones that are less than $750, $800. And I think people this year have started opening their eyes a little bit. And everyone kind of knew at this time that iPhones were expensive and all these other things. But now, I mean, people actually had an impact on the company, And obviously people have had impacts on companies before, but this release, like I said, was completely different. It really exposed the greed that some companies have with their products. And I think it's just bigger than Apple as well. I think a lot of different companies do these types of things. It's like they try to pull a fast one on the customers. And I think the iPhone XR inevitably actually kind of exposed that within their company. I think it kind of backfired a little bit, Now the crazy thing is that the iPhone XS and XS Max are much more expensive than this. And I kind of said that they were kind of a ripoff too. They're more of a ripoff than this. I believe that because in a way, I think the iPhone XR is a better deal. But because this phone was considered the cheaper model, Apple never said it, but I kind of took it as that. And so did a lot of other people. It was almost like getting less for more when you consider it. And especially when you compare the iPhone XR to past models, like the iPhone X. I mean, there's really not too much of a difference. The iPhone X, I think, is a better phone. So why the iPhone XR was the most important iPhone of 2018 is because it exposed these companies, not just Apple, Now, I think that Apple definitely learned their lesson, hopefully, and instead of, meaningless updates every year and quite possibly downgrades, companies will actually have to reinvent themselves every year to stay on top and keeping prices low and everything like that. Because if they keep, let's say the innovation goes way up and the prices go up, people might not want to upgrade as much, But if innovation goes up and prices get lower and lower, I think people will start upgrading more and more. And the flip side, I think, is actually pretty true as well. If prices go way up and innovation goes less, people aren't going to upgrade. But here's the other thing. If prices go low, and innovation, let's say, just upgrades a little bit every year, I think people would upgrade as well, too. I mean, think about it. If great phones are still getting cheaper and cheaper, if it's better than last year, and dude, I might upgrade. I mean, look at the OnePlus 6T. I definitely think the OnePlus 6T is a pretty decent sized upgrade coming from a OnePlus 6. But they were able to keep the same price for them, and that's pretty insane. And I guess Apple did it this year with the iPhone X going to the XS, but still, I mean, I just think the iPhone XR was priced way too much for what they were going for, and because of that, it really showed us, what companies are going for, And I think I saw an article recently that stated it costs like around $100 something, maybe like $200 something to create an iPhone XS and XS Max. Maybe it was like $300. So anything above $300 is pretty much their amount that they're getting in profit. So it's pretty much just greed at the end of the day. And I've never seen a release like this where people were just bashing the pricing. Usually it's the phone itself, but this time they bashed the pricing. That's way too expensive. People have done it before. But this release, I think, has been completely different, and it showcased what people want in a phone and what people want to pay for a phone ultimately. And people weren't just feeling the iPhone XR, they just didn't want to upgrade to it, which really pushed Apple into being in a weird situation. And if Apple's in a weird situation, they're going to have to push boundaries, they're going to have to do some crazy things. And I don't know where I've read this, but apparently a lot of the innovation companies do tends to happen in their hardest time. So if they're not doing so well, if especially a company like Apple, they're still worth tons of money, but if they want to go and actually stay on top the whole entire time and all those different things, they're going to have to reinvent themselves and innovate even more. So There's a lot of rumors going on next year that in 2019, the iPhones that are coming out later this or next year, they're going to stay the same body. They're not going to be changing too much. And honestly, if they do that, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think people are going to upgrade as much. They're going to have to find other ways and means to make money. And I think ultimately they either can take a step forward or they can take multiple steps backwards. And I think the iPhone XR was an eye-opener for not just Apple, but a lot of phone manufacturers. But even if it was just an eye-opener for just Apple only, that's still a big enough company to have a huge impact on all the other phone manufacturers too. So even though the iPhone XR was priced way too much, and in and of itself it wasn't the best phone of 2018, it was not the best phone at all, I think it was the most important, because from now on, phone companies are now going to double, triple, quadruple check every single factor of a phone and make sure, is it solid? Is it worth an upgrade? If it's not, we're not even going to release it, or we're going to change some things. We're going to lower the price. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I think that's ultimately what I wanted out of a phone, is more innovation at lower costs. And I think that's the trend we're going to go in from now. Now, I could be completely wrong with this whole video, but I think Apple learned their lesson, and I don't think they're going to change. So because of that, I think the iPhone XR is the most important phone of 2018 that was released. So if you have any questions or you completely disagree with me, leave it down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I know a lot of people aren't going to like me saying that, but that's kind of my opinion. You can have your own opinion too, man. Look at my veins right now, bro. What's going on? Like I said, any questions, leave them down in the comment section below, but hit that like button. That'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I would really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.